Hey everyone, let's talk about anvils. For most of the time that I've known, I obviously knew anvils as the things that everybody knows anvils as, but pretty recently I found out that they could be used to destroy items if they fall from high enough. And this was kind of cool learning about, but also a major hindrance as I could never use anvils for building traps in fear of deleting their items on accident. This small discovery, in conjunction with this unfortunate garbage problem that I found myself in, um, I decided that I wanted to design a machine that would take my items, my garbage, and destroy them using the power of anvils. Um, Plus, I've always had more than enough of them anyways. After running my iron farms for so long, I've had enough to sustain an entire lifetime of them. I was unfortunately hard pressed to find a location to put said machine because my base was so open and there was nowhere I could really bury it into the walls, and burying it into the ground was also a no-go considering how impractical it is to install anvil related things in the floor. It was this strange obstacle that opened my eyes to a different kind of solution. Perhaps I could build the anvil crusher off-site somewhere in the distance and launch the anvils towards my location from a great distance away. So I had the challenge and I had the determination to find a solution. Transport anvils to a cannon over 100 blocks away and send them flying back. Okay, let's do it. If I'm going to be totally honest, I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into. Thought it would be simple, just build a ton of TNT dupers, then send an anvil into the distance, figure out where it lands, and then be done with it. But after closer analysis, I realized that I had a lot of unanswered questions, like, how do you even build a TNT duper? I don't know how to do that. How do you fix the accuracy problem? I mean, make sure it lands in the same spot over and over again is difficult, and you need to make sure that it hits your items so that you aren't missing any chances to destroy them. And lastly, anvil transportation. Like, how do I get the anvils from the place that I'm standing all the way over to the cannon? So let's break it down. Let's start with the most simple of the problems. How do we get from anvils from point A to the point wherever I'm building the cannon? And I think the root of the part of this idea that may have even inspired the entire cannon is the fact that I discovered this neat functionality involving sand blocks where I could send them flying across these bubble column railways. And although they'd slow down, they'd actually go pretty far. And because of the way that the game is coded, this obviously carries into anvils. And this makes perfect sense because everybody knows that sand and solid iron both easily float on water. But the problem with this was that these aren't going far enough. I've got to travel 100 blocks from that mock-up of where my base is to where I'm building the cannon. So I'm going to need to add some simple booster tracks and fix that issue. Like so. Okay. And lastly, in order to get the anvils into this railway, I'm going to be using this tiny little system, which simply just eats the anvils into the floor. And I'm not going to explain how this works because it's probably equally as difficult to describe as this whole contraption, which actually launches the anvils, and it's also not nearly as interesting. Okay, now on to the actual cannon. I have designed and prototyped this thing an uncountable amount of times, and it's blown up in my face more times than I can count, both in creative and survival. And that's primarily because I designed this thing before I started using mods, so I didn't have the luxury of using World Edit to copy and paste it properly, to use clone commands. I also didn't have the luxury of making it so that TNT doesn't do block damage, and all I had was this rudimentary kill command that would kill any about to explode TNT. Of course I had to turn it off though for any real tests, which would end up in yeah. Another thing to note is that the TNT dupers that I used in this design, I've shamelessly ripped off of the Space-Based Dragon Slayer designed by Fallen Breath. And that's simply because, number one, it's a fantastic design, and number two, if I can use it to kill dragons, I should be able to use it to send anvils about 100 blocks. I definitely had to scale down the size a little bit because this is just too much, even for me. We've solved the problems of transporting the TNT with these anvil highways, and we've also solved the problem of launching the TNT to its respective location, but we've still haven't solved the problem of accuracy. If you ever tried to design one of these machines, you might note that even in a setup like this, which looks like it should yield a perfect straight shot, you might end up with some horizontal variance of some kind. And this is unfortunately due to the fact that TNT is actually slightly smaller than a full block, if you could see there. Meaning that when you make TNT, it could fly into any of these alignments where it's just up against this left wall or maybe up against this right wall, all within the tiny space of a block. And the only way we can align it is up against like a piston head or something, where it ends up being perfectly aligned with this piston face. But that just ends up with a system where we have this TNT aligned perfectly against this right edge and not in the center, which means that we still can't guarantee that it's going to get a perfect, smooth, straight launch. So how exactly do we solve something like this? And luckily I'm not the first person to experience this problem, and a bunch of people who are way smarter than I am designed a solution where they use pistons to push TNT in from this direction and then from this direction, so we can guarantee that this TNT is always in this corner. And then we do it on the other side as well. And since we can guarantee the locations of these two TNTs, when they're right next to each other in the same block, their forces will cancel out and yield a perfectly straight traveling anvil. And this is how we're going to solve the accuracy problem with these piston arrays that are going to use these pistons and this one to force it into the back two corners of this block, giving us a perfect straight shot launch that'll hit our target every single time. Like so. This right here is a simple mock-up of the setup in my server world, taking just a simple slice. So here we can just load in the anvil, get sent all the way down into the anvil highway, and also immediately gives the signal to fire for the cannon, which is going to send the anvil all the way over, and it's going to hit the same spot every single time. Honorable mention to double and triple checking your work. This thing has blown up multiple times because I've forgotten something, and I also had to rebuild the entire machine just because it was firing anvils right here instead of right here. So make sure to check your work. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Next time, I'm probably going to be starting a series covering all of the details with this project right here. It's probably the machine that has caused me the most grief out of anything I've ever built in my entire life, due to its complexity and the fact that it broke in many more ways than I could even think of understanding. And if you want to see that, make sure that you're subscribed. And if there's anything else you want me to cover in terms of video ideas or tutorials or guides on anything, make sure to comment it down below and I'll check it out. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you, and see you next time.